Keeping the trains on the tracks. Coming up on Face the State, the CEO of Norfolk Southern speaks with lawmakers at the Ohio State House. Plus, high-tech law enforcement. We'll talk with an Ohioan whose ideas got the attention of the White House.
This is outrageous.
And why lawmakers stormed out of a hearing this week at the State House. Face the State begins now. The CEO of the Norfolk Southern Railway faced state lawmakers. It's been more than 2.5 months since a train derailed in East Palestine, spilling toxic chemicals, upending that town's way of life. Good morning. We thank you for joining us for Face the State. I'm Tracy Townsend. 10 TV's Amy Steigerwald was there as Ohio lawmakers grilled Alan Shaw at the State House. He faced questions from the Select Committee on Rail Safety, which is reviewing the derailment.
For more than an hour, Norfolk Southern CEO Alan Shaw stood before the Ohio Senate Rail Safety Panel, explaining what went wrong in East Palestine on February 3rd and how he's working to fix it.
And we are making tremendous progress. We've hauled over 27,000 tons of soil off-site, over 12 million gallons of water off-site.
Shaw answered questions from lawmakers, some of whom have roots in East Palestine, about soil removal, staffing numbers, and the possibility of rerouting trains with hazardous materials on board. Another big question centered around supporting two-person crews on all trains, something many lawmakers are calling for to improve rail safety. But Shaw says there is no data between crew size and derailments.
And at this point, I have not seen any data that provides a direct link between crew size and derailments.
Shaw expressed his support of the Railway Safety Act, co-sponsored by Senator Sherrod Brown and J.D. Vance, which would enhance procedures surrounding the transportation of hazardous materials. Shaw pointed out any advancements to rail safety is something that's going to have to be an entire industry-wide change and improvement, which he is in support of and plans to take to D.C. in the very near future. In Columbus, Amy Steigerwald, 10 TV News.
This week, we talked with one of the senators behind the Rail Safety Act. Senator J.D. Vance says he was really frustrated with the pace of the cleanup following the derailment. But he says now it seems like that pace of cleanup has picked up. Just this week, Norfolk Southern said it had finished removing contaminated soil from the south track. But Senator Vance says now that it's out of the ground, it needs to get into the proper waste disposal facilities. Norfolk Southern says it has removed more than 25,000 tons of soil and 12 million gallons of water from that site in East Palestine.
Well, I was really frustrated by the pace of the cleanup. For a long time, you had this toxic chemicals basically just sitting in the dirt in East Palestine. I'm glad that they've now hastened the pace of the cleanup. You've got to get this stuff out of East Palestine, and that's really where we are on the next phase of the cleanup. Is we've got to make sure now that it's out of the ground that it gets out of East Palestine and into the proper waste disposal facilities. And I'm optimistic that that process is proceeding. I'm still a little frustrated that it's not going as quickly as it should, but that to me is where we really are in this cleanup. Is we got to get this stuff out of East Palestine and give the residents there some confidence that they can go back to their life. And you can't do that really while you've still got toxic chemicals there sitting in their community.
And we also spoke with Ohio Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown, who's working with Senator Vance to keep the rail safety legislation moving forward.
Senator Vance and I introduced this bipartisan bill. We've got a number of co-sponsors in both parties. We have a commitment that every Democrat's going to vote for it. We need to get a dozen Republicans or so. We're working on that. The Speaker of the House, we've got to get it through there. The Speaker of the House is frankly too close to the railroad lobby, so we need to keep pressure on him. President Biden is committed to signing the bill if we get it to his desk. So we know what we have to do. We also know the railroad lobby, that's how strong they are. Some of the most powerful lobbyists in the country. We also know that they cut a third of their workforce in the last 10 years and gave huge stock buybacks to their executives. Following that Wall Street model, you cut employees, your stock price goes up. we're keeping the heat and the light and the pressure on Norfolk Southern as we pass this bill and as we push Norfolk Southern to do the right thing for the citizens of East Palestine.
Just last week, Senator Brown visited East Palestine to continue to push for Norfolk Southern to cover the cost of medical expenses associated with that toxic train derailment. Transparency and trust are becoming critical in law enforcement across the country, including here in Columbus. Optimum Tech is a minority-owned company that works with the city of Columbus to provide law enforcement software. Greg Davda, who works with this business, was just invited to the White House this month to talk about technology related to criminal justice. He also discussed how to collect better data and ensure greater transparency in policing. A version of their record management system is hosted by the Ohio Attorney General's office. Recently, Davda met with Mayor Andrew Ginther. Davda says his business is in the running to assist the city's new Office of Violence Prevention.
When you think of outcomes you want in the cruiser when you're typing a report, or in the office when you're typing a report or creating statistics or visuals like analytic models, you want ways to shorten the time frame to get to the end result, as well as make it as easy as possible. Like a lot of industries, public safety, the people on the street, right, that are delivering the service to the communities are sometimes overwhelmed with everything that's going on, or perhaps aren't the most computer literate a lot of times. So you have to make it easy, like the easy button, gotta make it easy enough to use, but complicated enough that you're getting all the information and data. You still have 3 to 4% of your criminal population that's creating essentially 60-70% of your crime in the local jurisdiction. So that data, that percentage has stayed consistent across the board. I think what you have now is more sophisticated systems at the public safety level, right, that create more, what I'll say, more sophisticated criminals, right? You know, one's always trying to stay ahead of the other.
And Greg Davda is the chief marketing officer of the company. It's a minority-owned firm, and this technology also allows law enforcement to better map out crime and other trends in the community. So we'll be watching that. Davda says that the mayor is highly focused on transparency in law enforcement. And we did recently sit down with Mayor Ginther and the newly appointed head of the Office of Violence Prevention, Rena Shock. What will you do to prevent crime? Because it seems like it's just so rampant, so random.
Sure. So if you really look into the statistics, it can be random. Most of it is not. Most of it is led by some other type of factor that's playing into it. And of course, I don't have to tell you that crime is multifaceted. And somebody can be participating in a criminal act for a host of reasons, most of which I have learned and spent a great deal of time with over the years, learning exactly what motivates or what causes somebody to be justice involved, particularly in the criminal justice system. And so, in my opinion, prevention really looks like this agency helping to coordinate all city anti-violence programming to begin with. And then we hope to build relationships with our community-based organizations, our nonprofits, our members of the community who are just trying to do this work themselves so that we're all on the same page.
And you can see the full interview on 10tv.com/facethistate. Well, just this week, the city of Columbus named a new public safety director. Her name is Kate Pashotti, and she used to work in Mayor Andrew Ginther's office as his deputy chief of staff. 10TV's Richard Solomon sat down with her earlier this week to talk about her goals in this new role.
As the city of Columbus continues to grow, so does the call for public safety. A call that Kate Pashotti is the newest to answer as the city's newly appointed director of public safety.
I've had a long journey that has all culminated in where I am right now, and I think it's just kind of the perfect place for me to use all of my experiences.
And this appointment comes at a crucial time as the city navigates through ending gun violence and youth crime. The announcement, comforting news to Pastor Tim Aarons, pastor of First Congregational Church.
I've known Kate Pashotti for a good number of years.
He says the new safety director has good qualities of a leader, one who listens and understands.
This is a great time for someone who understands the ins and outs of the city to implement programs that are coming round now.
One of those programs Pashotti is focused on is Project Moonlight. This was a part of the city's plan to add 22 mobile lights and cameras and add more officers to parks and community centers around the city. In her new position, she'll oversee more than 100 uniformed and civilian employees. She's working to build the community's trust.
You know, the way to build our trust, man, is getting out and getting involved. We need to physically see you and knowing that you are here for us.
Ralph Carter is the founder of We Are Linden. He says he's hoping to see the new director improve the relationship between police and the Black community.
You know, that is a good blueprint to start from, to see what we're dealing with, to be out there and being boots on the ground with us and knowing that you are not just coming from behind the desk.
And leading the city in the right direction won't happen overnight. But Pashadi tells me she's ready.
I'm willing to go anywhere and talk to anyone that may have their doubts, but I'm ready to do this job and move the city forward.
That was 10 TV's Richard Solomon reporting. Pashadi says her biggest challenge is filling the shoes of other great leaders who served as directors before her. At the State House, a plan to ask Ohio voters to require 60% approval for constitutional amendments is moving forward. That's despite fierce opposition from Democrats. Watch this clip from the State House News Journal.
This is outrageous.
Ohio House Democrats walked out on a vote on House Joint Resolution 1, or HJR 1. This would make it harder to amend Ohio's constitution on an August special election ballot. And it's happening 3 months before a reproductive rights amendment is likely to be before voters. Also, this past week at the State House, members of the LGBTQ+ community came together to push back against 2 pieces of legislation. Protect trans youth! A crowd of opponents to 2 bills made their voices heard inside the State House. One piece of legislation would prevent trans athletes from playing with teams that are consistent with their gender identity. The other would ban gender-affirming care for children. Still ahead this morning, a visit from the country's top education official. What the U.S. Secretary of Education told Columbus City schools this past week. And the race for U.S. Senate, the Republican who's entering the ring. But first, show me the money. Consumer 10 tracks where the cash from sports betting is really going. We often hear the phrase, follow the money. 10 TV's Clay Gordon recently tried to do just that with sports betting. He found it might not be as easy as it sounds.
The first 2 months of legalized sports gaming pulled in $1.75 billion to Ohio casinos and sports books, which means Ohio will get about $29 million.
We had a pretty smooth and successful launch from the Commission's perspective. We had 16 online mobile operators launch and 13 in-person retail locations launch. It was the largest simultaneous launch of sports gaming in the U.S. And one of the largest expansions of gaming in Ohio's history.
Revenue from kiosks at restaurants, bars, and retail stores, $178,000 in the first 2 months. Here's where the money will go, according to the Office of Budget and Management. 0.5% of license fee revenue will go to the Department of Veteran Services for supplies and maintenance at the Ohio Veterans Home in Georgetown and Sandusky. 100% of gaming tax revenue and 99.5% of license fee revenues will be held in the Sports Gaming Revenue Fund. It will then flow to the Tax Refund Fund and the Sports Gaming Tax Administration Fund to reimburse expenses. The remaining 98% will be distributed to the Sports Gaming Profits Education Fund.
Spell that out for us. What's that going to look like one day? Do you know?
So I don't know. Those funds are appropriated by the members of the General Assembly, and so we will have to wait and see from them, how they choose to spend those funds.
Consumer 10 reached out to OBM for a timeline. A spokesperson says the various funds are pending in the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget.
At this point, I'm not aware of what those funds will be used for.
2% of the sports gaming tax revenue is earmarked for the Problem Sports Gaming Fund.
What really is the need in our state right now? Where do you think those dollars would be best used?
We know just from our own research that there's pockets of Ohio that really don't have access to clinical care for gambling treatment. So that's certainly a top priority. And then also just looking at making sure that counselors are trained, that prevention professionals are trained, as well as operators to really know how to recognize those gambling problems when they start early.
Is it a concern for you that that infrastructure is not complete yet before this has rolled out?
I think once they have time to really assess where they're at with those dollars, especially with that 2%, they'll make good decisions into how to utilize those funds and also listen to others.
Those decisions will ultimately determine when sports gambling revenue will be paid out, but organizations will have to wait until the budget is passed on July 1st.
All right, Clay Gordon joining us here on Face the State this morning. Thank you so much for
Good to see
joining
you.
us. I've got lots of questions
Sure.
because we heard a lot of this, it seems, when the lottery came to the state. It was going to education. What made you first decide you wanted to look into this?
Well, you remember when sports gambling was really ramping up towards January 1st, and I mean, every single commercial was a sports gambling commercial.
Yeah.
And then we started learning right after that a couple of these sports books that were launching and operating here in Ohio were starting to get fined and sanctioned. So my first question is why? Why was that happening? And then how much were they getting sanctioned and where was that money going? And we actually learned this week that there's been 5 sports operating books that have been fined so far. The last one settled on Wednesday. That was for a group called Play Up, which they actually got fined about $90,000 for potential illegal gaming activity. And I think the big headline from this week was that they can't reapply for a license now for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
That was the biggest headline I've seen so far with these sports fines. The 4 others, you know, we're talking like BetGM, MGM, Caesars, DraftKings, Barstool, we've heard those names before. Most of them got dinged for some kind of bad advertising practices. So they range in fines from $150,000 to $250,000. Some got dinged for advertising to kids under 21. So it really was a range of it. All of them have settled with the Casino Commission, but the state had basically got about $1.1 million in fines alone from the launch of sports gambling here in the state.
So you've mentioned the ads, and folks did see a lot of the ads on our air. I mean, there's one with, you know, big star like Jamie Foxx. So what was it about the ads? Is there something that we should be listening for?
Yeah, actually, the Jamie Foxx one is a great example because I think they say it's a no sweat first bet. I think that's their motto
Sounds
there.
good.
Yeah, it sounds good. But I think they started rolling out the terms like that because they were saying free bets in Ohio. So you get free bets, you get $200 in free bets. Well, there is no such thing as a free bet, and that violates Ohio law. And what the commission told me was this wasn't an overstep by some of these sports books. This was mainly a mistake from the advertising companies that they hired. They weren't aware of Ohio's rules because we have more strict rules than other states that have launched this. So it was kind of like an oopsie moment.
Right.
A lot of those sports books, you know, canceled their contracts with some of these advertisers because it cost them a pretty penny. I'm pretty sure DraftKings was fined $500,000 in total. So that's a lot of money for just getting dinged right off the bat.
And you and I have had these conversations in the office. I mean, when you say something like free bets, free monies, especially with the younger generation, you talk about problem betting.
Yep.
Are you learning more about how they're trying to protect that group?
Well, as I learned too, there's pockets of the state that are more educated with problem gambling than others. And the Problem Sports Gaming Network there was telling us that that's where some of the money should be funneled, and that will help. But again, we're not going to know this until they start talking about the fiscal year budget in July. So that we're going to continue to follow this. But you know, the state is $1.7 billion made off of it, and the state's going to get about $29 million, and that's just an estimation.
Wow.
So we don't really know yet. So we're working on this, and it's good. The revenues get reported the last day of every month. So every month we got a new story, Tracy.
All right, and so that means you'll come back.
I'll be back.
All right.
Anytime.
All right, thank you, Clay. All right, let's talk about education in Ohio. Coming up, the visit from the U.S. Secretary of Education to Columbus City Schools. Plus, an early graduation. We're going to take you to the ceremony for the Global Scholars Diploma. Welcome back to Face the State. A Cleveland businessman, Bernie Moreno, announced his run for an Ohio U.S. Senate seat. This is his second attempt. He's vying for the chance to take on Democratic U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown in 2024. It makes him the second Republican to enter the race. We talked with Moreno earlier this week after he made his announcement.
I'm getting into the race because we have career politicians, insiders that have put this country on a cliff. We need outsiders, people who have real practical business experience to actually represent the people of Ohio. I don't think it's going to be a messy primary. I think we're going to have to get all Republicans united to defeat Sherrod Brown. So I know the media is cheering for a messy primary. I know Sherrod Brown's cheering for a messy primary, but I think this ends up being a two-person race with very, very different views. Brutal campaign.
You may remember Moreno ran for the Republican nomination in 2022, but he dropped out after a private meeting with former President Donald Trump. The race is expected to draw another spirited GOP primary as Republicans try to unseat Senator Brown, who's among the Democrats defending seats in states carried by former President Trump back in 2020. The Ohio Democratic Party responded with this statement. We have part of it on your screen. Quote, "The Republican slugfest for Ohio's Senate seat is getting more crowded, chaotic, and messy by the day. With a year of nasty mudslinging ahead, it's clear that whoever emerges from this primary will be bruised, battered, and out of touch with Ohioans' values." Again, that is a statement from the Ohio Democratic Party. All right, Columbus City Schools hosted the U.S. Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, this past week to talk about early childhood education and celebrate Community College Month. This took place at Avondale Elementary School on Hawks Avenue. During the Secretary's visit to our town, he focused on early childhood education programs, discussed family engagement, and then took the Secretary to Columbus State Community College to celebrate Community College Month.
And girls, I could tell that your teacher's working really hard and a para-educator's working really hard to make sure you're getting those reading skills, right? And you're getting a lot of help with your classmates.
Secretary Cardona also met with local leaders to talk about how K through 12 school districts, community colleges, and employers work together to train students to meet growing job needs. Hundreds of high schoolers took part in an early graduation this week. The ceremony was part of the Global Scholars Diploma. It's a 3-year program where students pick a worldly issue with a take action plan on how to change it for the better. Topics range from hunger and poverty to discrimination and domestic violence. There were also projects that focused on mental health among minority populations.
It taught me that I am capable. I think it was one thing where there were many times, whether it was project management, challenges through communication, and being kind of a kid, you know, being able to kind of say like, hey, you know, I got to put myself out there and be able to brand myself, you know, so people support this cause as much as I do.
I am a STEM girl myself. I'm really interested in engineering, but even with that in mind, I hope to keep this project going and empowering other students to join me as leaders, leading this project within their own school districts and kind of rising up against adversity that they face.
The Columbus Council on World Affairs conducts global scholars programs in dozens of cities around Central Ohio. There are plans to expand this nationwide. And there you see our great friend Angela Ann, who was the MC for the diploma ceremony. A Columbus children's book author who just launched her second book is helping parents, teachers, and children deal with the issue of bullying. Paula Johnson-Neal is an Ohio State graduate and spent 26 years as a preschool teacher. Her first book, entitled I'm Gonna Have a Good Day, follows a girl who teases and plays practical jokes on her classmate, not realizing she might be bullying them. Her second book, released this past week, is called Breathe, Gabby, Breathe, and helps kids learn how to calm down when they feel stressed. She says teaching children good behavior skills early is the key to prevent bullying in the future.
If we want children to be kind, we have to start early on in the early years, teaching social problem-solving skills.
You can learn more about this book at 10tv.com/featured links. And happy reading. Thank you all for joining us today. We wish you a great week, and we'll see you next week.